What's going on, everybody? Again, Happy New Year. It is January 2nd. This is day 2 of the 31 days of podcasting. And this is Courtney McIntosh, your host of the Black Dad Chronicles, where I try to take a look at fatherhood from a black perspective. Also, just talk about random things that I want to talk about. I'll be doing definitely a lot of that this month as I am challenging myself with 31 days of podcasting. I will be bringing you a podcast every single day for the month of January. And this is one goal that I have set out to accomplish, and I am going to accomplish it. I'm that confident in myself that I'll do this. And like I said, every day won't be a full podcast. Sometimes I might even, maybe have some poetry that I'll write and just spit it on the podcast. You know what I'm saying? I'm testing the limits of what I can do here. So today's episode is going to be totally about football, especially football here in the state of Michigan. And particularly when it comes to the Michigan Wolverines and the Detroit Lions. One team I'm not really going to mention too much is the Michigan State Spartans, because they're pretty much in a really good place. I believe that they have the best returning quarterback in all of the Big Ten. So, and Brian Lewerke, who was a sophomore this year, coming back to Michigan State next year. And like I said, I think he's the best returning quarterback in the conference. Same can't be said for our beloved, Michigan Wolverines, though. After a subpar season, a subpar season was capped off yesterday by a humiliating, horrible bowl loss to the South Carolina Gamecocks of the SEC in the Outback Bowl. Michigan was up in this game at 19-3 midway through the third quarter, and then just collapsed. Michigan allowed 23 straight points to South Carolina and then just collapsed it all down on the end. And it was kind of a nice way to sum up the season. The defense held strong for the majority of the game, and the offense didn't bail them out. We saw the same thing at several points during the season. Michigan State, a couple other games. Well, pretty much all of their losses, with the exception of, the Ohio State game too, because Michigan's defense just, totally collapsed in the second half, but the offense gave them nothing. So I'm going to try to take a look at, number one, how Michigan lost the game. Well, okay, so my number one biggest issue with Michigan all year was the lack of offensive creativity. And when Jim Harbaugh was hired, I was scared this would happen, because when Harbaugh got hired, it was, Harbaugh is going to get us back to Michigan football, 3 yards and a cloud of dust. He's going to put emphasis on power running and the running game and blah, 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 blah. And I was a little leery. I just felt that, Harbaugh's not going to be able to, it's a different, college football is different than when he was at Stanford and he could line up, 3 tight ends with all those massive offensive linemen and just run the ball. Wisconsin doesn't. Now, Wisconsin plays that way the majority of the time, but hey, Michigan's not Wisconsin, sad to say. That shouldn't even be something to utter. Michigan's not Wisconsin, But as far as, Wisconsin's, you could say Wisconsin had the best running attack in the last decade of all of college football. and probably stretches, longer than that, if not the best, one of the best. So people were excited. Oh, Michigan's going to get back to this power running, and they're going to, just dominate people at the line of scrimmage. And okay. And we see that Jim Harbaugh is, what is this? This is Jim Harbaugh's, he just completed his third season. And guess what, guys? Michigan hasn't proved that they can, one, run the ball on anybody that's a good team, two, beat good teams. Come to find out, all of their victories, they won 8 games. The only one of their victories this year the only one of the teams that they beat this year that had ended the season with a winning record was Purdue, and Purdue ended up 7-6. The Big Ten was 7-0 in bowl games, and I was talking to my good buddy Meach, who is the he's the biggest Michigan Slappy and Jim Harbaugh apologist that I know. I mean, golly, look, I consider myself, I'm a fan, but at the same time, I'm also a realist. So while I support my teams and I'm a fan of my teams, I'm also a realist, and I know if my teams are bad. He gives me, that's the reason why I gave up on the Lions this year, was because I saw no changes, and I was tired of getting let down, investing in the Lions and just getting let down and let down and let down. So the only Lions games I watched this year was like half of the Thanksgiving game, and then half of, probably like a quarter of the game against the Bengals, which they lost, and took them out of the playoffs, so whatever. So I decided to give up on the Lions and the NFL for this season. The reason why I decided to give up on the NFL was, one, because I find pro football boring, but two, also because of the treatment of Colin Kaepernick. But anyway, back to Michigan. I'll touch on the Lions soon, I promise. So, Michigan's quarterbacks this season threw for 9 touchdown passes. Let that sink in. The quarterbacks at the University of Michigan, 3 played this season, combined threw 9 touchdown passes. The Naval Academy, who is a power triple option running team, threw for 10 touchdown passes. When your quarterbacks are throwing for less touchdowns than the Naval Academy, that's a problem. That is a big time problem. My number one complaint all year was Michigan's offense had no creativity, no playmakers, and the playmakers they did have didn't have anybody to get them the ball. Wilton Spate started off the season regular. If you can say that their offensive MVP for this season should have probably been their kicker, Quinn Nordine. Hey, Nordine kicked 4 field goals yesterday, and was pretty much Michigan's only scoring until fullback Ben Mason scored a touchdown. But the offense gave them nothing yesterday. I mean, and you could pretty much say all year. You could say Karan Higdon padded his stats against bad teams, and you can't necessarily argue that. I mean, let me while I bring up Karan Higdon, let me bring up his stats for this year, because he what I'm saying, he ran for a lot of yards this year. He really did. But most of them, let me see, he ran for 994 yards and 11 touchdowns this year. So which, looks good on paper. But then you go to his game by game stats. So Florida, he only had 7 attempts for 28 yards, 4 yards a carry. Cincinnati, he only had 4 rushes for 13 yards, 3.3 yards a carry. Air Force, 12 rushes, 64 yards, 5.3 yards a carry. Purdue, 10 attempts, 31 yards, 3.1 yards a carry. Michigan State, 12 rushes, 65 yards, 4.4 yards a carry. Indiana, the vaunted Hoosier defense, he ran for 200 yards on, 8 yards a carry. At Penn State, which they lost 42-13, 15 rushes, 45 yards. At Rutgers, that vaunted Rutgers defense, 18 rushes, 158 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Same thing against Minnesota. Minnesota, 16 rushes, 200 yards. Maryland, the vaunted Maryland held him to 50 yards. 50 yards. Then against Wisconsin, 7 attempts for 20 yards. Then against Ohio State, 11 attempts, 55 rushes. 11 attempts, 55 yards. South Carolina, 17 attempts, 65 yards. And you know what? I'm going to go to Chris Evans, their other running back, because you'll see a theme. Not only could Michigan's running backs, not really get any yardage, their offensive line couldn't block. Now, when you look at Chris Evans, it's kind of a different story. Chris Evans had 114 yards rushing against Florida, 133 yards rushing against Cincinnati, 89 yards rushing against Air Force, 20 yards rushing against Purdue, 9 yards rushing against Michigan State, 38 against Indiana, 36 against Penn State, and 109 against Rutgers. It seemed like everybody feasted on Rutgers in the Michigan backfield. But I'm sorry. That was Ty Isaac. Who actually did look confident before he got hurt. So let me go to Chris Evans. And so another thing that annoyed me watching Michigan. Now, if you look at their running back, Chris Evans, he's a slider between he and Kalani. They got the lion's share of the carries this year. But he doesn't look like he fits the mold of a power runner. Yet, Michigan constantly pounded him straight into the line of I formation. Chris Evans right up the middle. I mean, you would think that, I don't know. I'm not a football coach. I only played 1 year of high school football. But I know what my eyes tell me. So, analytics is such a big thing in sports today. But sometimes you cannot, discount the eye test. And what the eye test told me all season last week. I'm trying to find those quotes. He basically said, you know, Jim-Harbaugh was overrated. And you know what? He is. Right now, right now, Jim-Harbaugh is overrated. Stafford in. So where do the Detroit Lions go for quarterback next? Because I mean, offensively, other than the running game, you can say that hasn't been. I say, okay, so I say Jim Caldwell was the main problem. The problem number one and number two, maybe number three. But lack of talent was probably, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and with the playmakers. Because I mean, look, Golden Tate, Marvin Jones, they showed themselves to be really good offensive weapons from Matthew Stafford. Yvonne played less snaps, but yet his production was up. Kenny Galladay looks promising. You just have no Michigan, where does Michigan go from here? This is Michigan Center podcast. They got to be more creative on offense. Like the Lions were really predictable when they lined up a pistol formation. They were running the football. 9 times out of 10, they lined up a pistol, they were running the ball. Michigan's offense was that. South Carolina said that we knew in the passing game, they were going to run 1 or 2 plays. No variety. And that's it. They saw that on film, and they picked it up after the second drive. And it showed Michigan's offense couldn't do anything at all. And when your offense is not supporting your defense can only hold for so long. And that's what happened yesterday. No offensive creativity at all. And you know what? Jim-Harbaugh passed out of the shotgun a lot more than I thought he would this year. But the offense was just mad vanilla. Ohio State, you look at Ohio State doesn't have vanilla offense. Michigan State doesn't have vanilla offense. And one of the things where I say that if you look at, Mark Antonio and how he coaches his players and how he gets the best out of his players, you look at their receivers compared to Michigan's receivers. Michigan's receivers have a higher star count. They're more highly touted. Michigan State always has good receivers. Michigan State always has 1 or 2 receivers that they can go to and depend on in crunch time. Who's that guy from Michigan? Who has been that guy from Michigan? Last year, they had 2 senior receivers that they can go to in crunch time. They didn't have that this year. But who else been Michigan State? And Felton Davis looks like a hell of a receiver from the Spartans. Listen, I am a Michigan fan. Go blue, bleed blue, and Mays, I'm also a realist. And I'm also not a hater. So, that's all I got on the University of Michigan today. That's all I got on Michigan today. Shout out to everybody who chimed in on the live stream yesterday. That's what I do with my wife. I love doing the podcast with my wife, and I promise you guys, during this 30 days of podcasting, she will be back on at some point to talk about something. Tomorrow's podcast probably going to be comic book centered because it's Wednesday, and Wednesday is comic book day. So every single Wednesday, I have to check out what's coming out. So I don't know what my playlist is, but guess what? Tomorrow I want to talk to y'all about jump. If you want to get in contact with me at Black Chronicles, shoot me an email at blackdadchronicles@gmail.com. You can also go to the Black Dad Chronicles Facebook page and go to Google Play, anywhere, iTunes.